There are many countries and cultures in the world, and surely there are good and bad parts to every one of them. For example, putting excessive pressure on those below you by taking advantage of the difference in status. Japan is no exception to this. Until the early 1990s, Japan's economy grew by taking advantage of its manufacturing power and became the second largest economy in the world. As a result of the bubble economy that Japan itself created, the government imposed financial restrictions on investments in land and real estate, which had become too expensive, and Japan's economy went into recession like a domino effect. This had an impact on the manufacturing industry, and many highly skilled engineers lost their jobs due to restructuring. During the IT bubble in the early 2000s, Japanese electronics manufacturers, instead of taking responsibility for being behind the times, lobbied politicians to pass a bill to reduce the number of full-time employees and increase the number of temporary workers. Company executives repeatedly carried out restructuring, believing the words of a few managers who were good at flattering rather than the abilities of their employees. And as a result, many talented young people lost their minds. In Japan's electronics manufacturing industry, which had lost its ability to innovate, lost the electronics market to Korean and Chinese manufacturers around the world, and further lost its strength, falling behind in smartphone manufacturing, and as a result, even surrendering its own mobile phone market to the US iPhone and the Korean Galaxy. All of this was a return for Japan's own actions, which involved restructuring highly skilled engineers and giving overseas companies the opportunity to headhunt them. During the restructuring, many workers were suddenly taken off projects and fired. If they were then offered several times more than they had been paid, that would be enough to make them move to a neighboring country. A little while later, the recession caused by the Lehman shock, triggered by bad loans from subprime mortgages, spread to the world, and Japan's economy worsened further. The population decline had already begun years ago, and fears of a shrinking domestic market and the effects of a prolonged recession were used by employers as an excuse to exploit workers, resulting in workers losing their value. Many workers were afraid of losing their jobs, so they were forced to say yes to the company and cling to it no matter how much unpaid overtime they had to work. Workers were simply afraid of losing their positions or being fired, and the authorities and media turned a blind eye to Japan's labor environment, which was becoming increasingly different from the rest of the world, as if to protect the company. As a result of repeating this for 30 years, the current legal hourly wage in Japan is still 1,004 yen, which is equivalent to $7 at the current exchange rate. In Tokyo, which has the highest legal hourly wage in Japan, it is 1,113 yen, which is less than $8. The cost of living in Tokyo is very high, and if you want to rent an apartment and live a comfortable and sociable life, you need a net income of at least 350,000 yen, more than $2,000 per month. In terms of gross annual income, that is $3,500, and to earn that at an hourly wage of $8, you need to work long hours, which you can earn by repeating this process 6 to 7 days a week. Even if you calculate the hourly wage at $10, this calculation results in 12 hours of work per day, 6 days per week. This is not a comfortable life. Even this is a hypothesis, and in reality, there are still prefectures where the legal hourly wage is under 900 yen, which is $6. Those who complain about the environment are harassed and threatened by their superiors and managers, and forced to quit voluntarily. The loyal employees who remain in the company mock those who have left, not knowing that many of the employees they are laughing with will suffer the same fate. And even if those who are favored by the superiors are promoted and given decision-making power, performance does not improve because they are incompetent and cannot make the right decisions, and the burden is passed on to the lower-level workers. Highly paid officials who do not admit that they are the cause of the problem and boast only stay in their comfortable chairs. And in order to protect themselves, they use pressure to crush young people who have the ability and desire to reform. If your boss dislikes you and you are forced to deviate from your career, you have no choice but to continue to be treated badly or change jobs. The boss thinks that there are plenty of replacements for the subordinates who suck up. And we can only watch as the people who are good at currying favor with their bosses move up in the ranks. As a result of 30 years of recession, this is the prevalent work environment in many parts of Japan. Due to the lockdown that began in 2020, the recent wars, and the historic depreciation of the yen, the prices of energy and food imported into Japan have risen sharply to unprecedented levels, pushing up the minimum cost for people to live and engage in activities. And therefore, the real wage is in a state where the middle class and below cannot maintain their current level of living. And the young people in the middle class work long hours without enjoying life, exhausted, and on days when there are no shifts, they spend their time alone at home playing games rather than going out and spending money in the first place. And the government shouts, "We want to increase the birth rate." It feels like we have become a country full of jokes. Let's dig a little deeper and see who is responsible for this. For over 80 years since the end of the war, Japan has been run by the Liberal Democratic Party. Yes, the government that lost the war to the United States and has been ruling Japan ever since it's called the Party of Liberal Democracy, which is the American slogan. Welcome to Japan, I guess. In the past 80 years, the LDP has been ousted twice, and both times the incompetence of the party that ran the government was made known to the public through the media, resulting in the current ruling LDP returning to power in the election. And if you want to become a politician who can move Japan forward, the only way is to become a member of the LDP, and the party is tangled up with old people trying to protect their vested interests. If you try to change that from the inside, you will be swept away like dust off your shoulder, and the career you have built with your own efforts will be ruined. Yes, that's a story we've heard somewhere before. It is the LDP that has run this country, and it is the LDP that has allowed the recession to continue for over 30 years. Now they are trying to revive Japan's manufacturing industry as a semiconductor manufacturing base for the United States, but that will not solve the population problem, which is the basis of consumption forecasts. The opposition parties do not make proposals that reach the public, but simply criticize the LDP. They realize that this approach will not gain the support of the public, but are not at a crossroads to change. Or only politicians who seem to be backed by foreign forces other than the United States stand out in the media. Even when the new generation runs for election, they are ignored by the media or treated as eccentrics and do not receive any good attention. Old people in rural areas, who make up a large portion of the electorate, see Japan's post-war development as the result of the LDP, and many of them will not be able to change what they believe now. And will they vote for the LDP in future elections and ask to cling to their daily lives as they have been until now?